Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unicorn Trajectory podcast. Our guest today is Umair Masoom, the founders and CEO of Mycoio, the world's largest and fastest growing Web3 streaming platform with more than 12 million users. Umair, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Skye. It's a pleasure being here.
Web3 is considered a buzzword. Can you explain what Web3 means for typical consumers or investors who may need to become more familiar with the concept?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it very simple. So, it all started with a Web3 world, which was, the simple way of explaining it is one-way communication or read. So within Web 1, you could only read. You could go to a website and you can read information. The internet was largely used for information sharing, which was one-way communication. The consumer could not go back and interact with the content that they would read, right? Whereas Web 2 was, the world of social media, where now they could read and write because they could also interact with the website. There was, if they were using an app, there was always a feedback button in there. They could go and chat with a customer service agent. Or if you're talking about, the traditional social media platforms, which are now, I call them traditional. But you can obviously go and communicate with them. You can have your own profiles. So read and write is Web 2. And Web 3 is obviously, in my opinion, it's the final evolution whereby it's read, write, and own, which means now with Web 3, whether you're talking about any consumer segment, the consumer not only reads and writes, but they're also able to own the content that they're consuming. And, this is the intersection where Mycoio is building. We're building at the intersection of Web 3 and content. Um, and yeah, so I think that's an easy explanation for a common person.
So, what is Mycoio as a platform?
So Mycoio is the next wave within video consumption. And if I want to simplify it for you, if you look back at the times when, video content consumption was largely passive, it was linear, which means that there used to be a time when we used to wait on a Sunday night, let's say, to watch an episode of Friends at 8 p.m. And at that point in time, we didn't have the option to be able to decide what to watch at a time and place of our choice. We were limited by space, we were limited by time. We had to sit in our TV lounge in front of a screen at a fixed time, right? Um, Whereas platforms like Netflix came about, later in 2008-9, there was an evolution of video on demand content. And now the consumers had more power because now the consumer could actually decide, okay, I can actually decide what to watch at a time and place of my choice, right? Which was the next wave of content. And while people think that this wave of content that came about in 2008 and 9 it was because of the platforms and their technology, I have a very simple view to this. And my simple view is that that evolution came about because of a changing need, right? Because the consumers at that point in time were frustrated. They needed more power. They were tired of the fact that they had to be dictator. They wanted to choose the content that they want at their comfort, right? And this need for empowerment was an insight that was picked up by someone at Netflix, probably, or someone at one of these video on demand platforms. And that's where it changed. So the shift was the consumer's expectation and power. The shift was not the technology. The technology was just a facilitator, right? And now the consumer keeps evolving with time. So, a few years later, the consumer now wanted more power because the consumer was like, okay, great. Now I can decide what to watch at a time and place of my choice. Now I also want to be able to decide who to watch from. You know, I should be able to decide the content creator that I like. Maybe I like Skye's videos. She doesn't appear on TV. She doesn't have a degree in journalism or in broadcast production, but I love her videos. She does cool videos about cooking, let's say, and she can do them with her phone. So now the consumer needed more empowerment, which means that I also want to be able to decide who produces the content, whose content I watch. And this is the next wave that came in. I'm talking about 2015, 16 platforms like TikTok, YouTube, they came about. Again, it was empowerment. And now the last wave of empowerment is where the consumer needs to not just decide who, where, what, but the consumer actually wants to be an active member in the content production process, in the funding process. They want to be a member within the revenue process, which means that they want to have a stake within the overall content economy. They need absolute empowerment, which is the concept of Web3. Web3 is about absolute empowerment and ownership. And this is what Myco is trying to deliver to our consumers, so that they have absolute empowerment in the sense that they get a part of the revenues that we make as a platform. They're able to co-invest into content. They become a part of the creative journey. Um, and they actually become owners, not just
So
consumers.
let's say if I use the Myco app, so I will be able to view content and I will be able to receive like part of your advertising revenue. And also if I like a film project or documentary project on Myco, I can also crowdfund.
You can crowdfund, you can vote for it. Obviously, crowdfunding right now within our region, from a regulatory standpoint, it's still very complicated. But yes, you can go vote for the piece of content that you like as a community. And, we've been able to facilitate the funding of almost 200 projects till now, which are mostly rising independent filmmakers, creators. But I think the interesting part, which we've been able to scale up, is the revenue share with the consumer, right? Because we've been able to do millions of micro payment transactions where people have been rewarded for watching content because they're actually getting a part of the revenue. And while it sounds fascinating to a few people, okay, I can watch content and I can make money out of it. For us, it's not fascinating. For us, we feel that the consumer deserves, it's the consumer's right to make that part of the revenue, because they are the ones contributing the eyeball. The ad revenue is essentially coming because of the viewer. The ad revenue, you might be the best content creator in the world, but if you don't have a viewer, you're not going to get a single ad impression on your content. The ad impression comes because a consumer comes and the consumer watches the content, and there is a brand that is targeting that consumer, which means that the consumer has some buying power, purchasing power, has a certain standing, fits into a certain concept of a consumer or a certain segment within the consumer segments. So they are an essential contributor within the economy, which means that they should also take something out of the economy, right?
Yes, and it makes a lot of sense because back in the days, if I watch videos, not only, it's not only that I don't make any money, but I also sell my data.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I'm not getting anything out of it, but I also losing.
You're also selling your data. Yeah. So again, that's the power of decentralization, because when you have a decentralized sort of Web3 mindset towards building something, you do realize who the ultimate owner is. So they're the actual owner of the eyeball, which means that they're part owners of the economy. They are also the owners of their own data, right? And so decentralization can actually empower the consumer in a way that the consumer can monetize their eyeball in the right way. They can monetize their voting right in the right way. They can become co-investors through the crowdfunding model, and they can also really own their own data, right? They can own their own data. They can have real-time visibility with transparency on the data that they're consuming and where their data is being shared, right? And with the use of blockchain and decentralized technologies, I think all of that is possible today, which is exactly the area where Myco is building on.
So fascinating, and congratulations. And what is Myco's business model as of today that enables you to make a profit of $1 million over the revenue of $7.5 million?
Yeah, so we consider ourselves to be a content super dApp. And if I'm to simplify that for you, it's a decentralized video consumption platform that has everything video content. So we have all multiple verticals of content within our interface, within our platform. We have live sports, which is where a lot of the growth comes from. But we also have, a lot of other VOD content, which is films, documentary films, TV shows, a lot of content that obviously has been funded or produced through our community, but a lot of content that we've also acquired, syndicated, or licensed. And we also have a UGC segment on the platform, which means that there are multiple influencers who are authorized to be able to publish content on the platform. We've got now more than 2,000 influencers. And you can become a verified influencer, and then you can start publishing your content. A lot of our consumers have actually evolved from being viewers to influencers or creators. And that's how we have now almost 1 million videos on the platform. So our business model revolves around three areas. One is when I say live sports being the largest area of growth for Myco, because that's where the largest consumer segment comes from. But that's also where the largest advertising revenue comes from, right? Because we get essentially, for example, we are the rights owners for the Cricket World Cup. In this region, we've also got, now recently we've signed up a huge partnership with Willow TV US for North America, which means that we're also distributing most of the high profile cricket games in that region. And we're doing a lot of other sports as well. So what happens is that when a consumer comes and watches our live sporting content, we have our own, advertising sales model. We have our own ad sales team, and we're able to sell the impressions to the different advertisers, which allows us to generate a significant portion of our overall revenue. But then we also get revenue through programmatic exchanges, which are all, automated, which are integrations that exist with the existing programmatic platforms such as Google DV360, for example. So yeah, that's primarily our business model. But what we also do is, since we have a lot of content that we produce, we facilitate, we co-own, we also get into content trading and sub-licensing. So there are opportunities where we are able to trade our content or sub-license it to. We have rights to something whereby we have an opportunity, let's say, to go and sub-license to another platform or to a TV channel. So we do a lot of content trading as well. So the business model, I'd say it's obviously advertising is the largest portion of our business right now, which is ad impressions that we deliver on the platform, which is both video ads and display ads. But at the same time, we're also content providers. We also produce our own originals. So we also, serve these originals and distribute them to other platforms. We make money from it. And lastly, one of the important aspects also to our business is that, our originals, when we produce our own originals, obviously there are opportunities for third-party partnerships in there.
Yeah, this is what I like about you personally as a founder, right? Because the core business model is very strong.
Yeah.
And it probably stem from your years of experience in advertising, in broadcast channel, in marketing, and so the economic engine of streaming sport and advertising. It can sustain the growth of the other creations and revenue streams, right?
Yeah.
Which is probably makes Myco one of a few web3 companies that I know that is actually profitable, right? Do you know how many web3 companies that are actually profitable in the world?
I think if any, there are ones that you could easily count on your fingertips. I'll tell you what the problem is. See, the problem is that, and I've spoken at a few conferences, and something really interesting that I said, which people came to me later on, and they were like, "That makes a lot of sense." The problem with Web3 is that Web3 at large right now, as it stands, it's not a B2C industry. It's not a business to consumer industry, right? It's a B2G industry. And you would be wondering what the G stands for. So the G stands for gamblers and geeks, because majority of the projects and the products that you see within Web3 right now, they are not targeting real consumers. They're targeting people who are just coming in for quick money, or they're targeting people who are geeks, which are, because, those products are so difficult to understand and to consume and to transact, that a normal individual cannot go through that process, which makes them non-scalable. When it makes them non-scalable, it means they can't generate enough revenue because there's no real consumer behind it, right? They're just trying to, essentially, a lot of the products are trying to solve the same problem for the same set of people. It's the same set of people which are Web3 native who are trying to create products for each other. How are you going to expand? The only way to expand is by entering into a real business which is targeting a real consumer and has a real revenue inflow. Because now, on top of that, on the basis of that real revenue backbone that you have, a profitable operation that you have, now you can migrate hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, and hopefully in the future you can migrate billions of people into Web3. But you have to give them what the consumer is already used to consuming. You can't go and offer them something which they're not used to consuming, And I give this example in gaming as well, because one of the reasons why most of the largest Web3 games, the largest metaverse Web3 projects out there, if you go and look at their daily active users, you will find 12 users. The largest names. I'm not going to take names, but they're these companies are worth billions. How many users do they have on their games? It's like 12 users. Why?
Really? Seriously?
Yeah, because the games are not consumer savvy,
Mm.
you know. So what we need to do as an industry is focus on products which people already like to consume. So the
Yeah.
games that people are already used to playing, build them at the same level. Streaming content that they want to consume, give them the content that they already want to consume. We're giving
Yeah.
them the Cricket World Cup that they want to watch. We're giving them the English Premier League that they want to watch. We're giving them the tennis and the paddle and the squash and all of these sports that they're already watching on other platforms. And we're saying, come watch it on Myco under a new economic model, which is Web3 based, whereby you get a share of everything that we do. You're more empowered. You can participate in the creative process. You can participate in our economy, and you can feel like you're an active member of what's being built. All of those benefits while getting to watch the same content that you already would have watched, right?
Yeah, and it
That's
makes
where,
sense, right? Because,
yes.
for example, like I already pay probably like close to $100 a month for watching like sport channels. So
Mm.
now what you bring to me is like, okay, Sky, come to Michael, watch the same sport and the same advertising.
Yeah.
And then first that to me makes like economic sense. And then I get into the app and then there might be something there, but the entry
Entry
is
is
not.
very easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, you see, again, one of the reasons why a lot of the Web3 companies struggle to build sustainable businesses is because, as I said, even the ones that are building them are geeks, which have only been used to a lot of these, I don't want to use the word kids, but a lot of these founders are like really young and they were born within the crypto and the Web3 landscape. And, everything that they learned was around this, which means that they never built real consumer businesses. They don't know how to build real consumer businesses, right? And that's where the weakness lies. That's why you haven't had, yeah, there's been so many Web3 unicorns, but if you are to name one consumer driven Web3 unicorn, you won't find anyone, right?
Yeah.
And I personally feel that, yes, there's a lot of focus on Web3 gaming, which is great. But I personally feel that within the entire landscape of Web3, video streaming is the Trojan horse because it's the easiest access to a billion users. Right now, there's 5 billion consumers consuming video content across different platforms globally. And all of these users, they would migrate easily into Web3 without even realizing that they're on Web3. They're on chain using a model like Myco if it can be scaled up.
Yeah, you're right. Because I was hunting for a profitable, fast growing Web3 company with a very scalable business model to be on the Unicorn Trajectory podcast because that's what I'm interested about. And it was very hard for me to find one until I asked someone and I asked someone and I asked someone and I found you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say you landed at the right place.
Yeah. So how does Michael integrate Web3 onto its platform to benefit real consumer like me?
Yeah. So I think the integration is at two levels. One is the economic layer, which is the easier part, which I think we've already been able to crack pretty much. We're almost 80-90% there as far as the economic layer is concerned. And what we're trying to do on the economic layer is that the entire economic activity that happens within a Web2 streaming ecosystem happens on chain, and we're very close to delivering that entire economic layer, which is built on chain, which means that the funding and financing of content should be able to happen on chain. There should be a possibility for fundraising for content creators that could happen on chain. At the same time, there could be redistribution of revenues that happens on chain in a decentralized environment, which Myco, as you know, we are already doing. We've done at a very large scale till now, which is redistributing our advertising revenue back to the consumers as well as to the creators. And ideally, the last part of the economic layer is also that there should also be distribution possibility on chain, which means that if let's say you're sub-licensing a content to a third party platform or a third party TV channel or some other third party that you partner up with, you should also be able to do that on chain, right? So that's the economic layer. But the second part, which I think is extremely important and it's still going to take a lot of time, is the infrastructure layer, which means that right now the infrastructure, mostly when it comes to video consumption and video streaming, is centralized. People are using existing providers such as AWS, for example. A platform that is working with AWS is largely only working with AWS. Whereas when it comes to the who's providing the actual video infrastructure, there could be a decentralized solution to that, right? And now, fortunately, now in the world, there are some good companies that are working on providing with decentralized video storage and as well as video infrastructure, including transcoding capabilities. So we obviously want to also move that on chain, which is the next phase of expansion and improvement as far as Myco is concerned as a platform. What that will also do is once the entire consumption and storage is also done in a decentralized environment, what that then allows is also redistribution of IP, for example. Then IP can be distributed on chain. Real content trading can happen on chain. You were talking about consumer data protection. Then the consumers can essentially actually own their own data. Creators can actually own their own videos because now their videos will be sitting on a chain or will be sitting in a decentralized environment rather than a centralized environment, right? Because, for example, right now you are a popular creator, you do your podcasts. I'm sure you do them on Spotify, on YouTube, and when you upload a video, you go to people and you tell them, "Hey, my podcast you can watch on my channel on YouTube." But is it really your channel? Not really, because the entire content is stored, let's say, somewhere on an Amazon server somewhere in India, and if someone wants potentially they could even take it down, right? But imagine if this entire infrastructure is built in a decentralized environment where not one individual or one entity has the power to pull the trigger, take the content out, then that is real ownership, right? And we want to enable real ownership. In the long run, our vision is to be able to create an environment whereby you have real ownership for the content creators, publishers, and the entire community actually owns everything.
I understand that in theory, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, but also from my understanding, the current blockchain infrastructure, it's still not moving fast enough with the needs of platforms like Myco, right? Right now you have like 12 million users. But is the infrastructure pose a significant challenge to you to scale like to 100 million or to 300 million?
Yeah, I think the shift is going to happen and the shift is going to happen soon. Unfortunately, the bigger problem that I see is that most of the leaders within the Web3 space, including most of the largest L1s and L2s that exist out there, as I said, this has been a B2G industry, business to gamblers. Right. So all of them till now have unfortunately focused on supporting projects and providing infrastructure for projects that are still targeting those gamblers, which is like you'll see hundreds of CFI solutions, you'll see hundreds of launch pads, you'll see hundreds of the same product coming over and over again. But the larger, players within the crypto and Web3 ecosystem, they haven't really focused on building infrastructure for real projects like ours, right? Because their focus has been in the wrong place. Let's be very honest. However, I've seen a big shift in the past 1 year.
Because you're going out shopping for infrastructure, right?
Yeah. So we're going shopping infrastructure. We've obviously been meeting a lot of the new blockchains that have come out there in the past year, 2 years. Some big names that have been built. I'm not going to take any names, but I think now I see the improvement in vision, and I see that the newer ecosystems that are being built, they have a more consumer-driven vision, and they're trying to focus on products which enable onboarding in a very easy environment, in a very subtle environment, in an environment whereby consumers don't even need to know that they're transacting on chain. And I think that's where I love some of the blockchains that are trying to build use cases for consumer driven products like us, and they're also working on providing large scale storage, large scale infrastructure, which could enable a platform like Myco in the future to be able to do what we need to do in a truly decentralized environment, right? So there is a shift happening. I know it's very slow. Right now, if I want to, so some of my streams, for example, our last Cricket World Cup, we had the Pakistan-India game in which we had 1.2 million concurrent users at one point in time. So at one point in time, there were 1.2 million users by the second who were on the platform watching the game, right? And you're right. Right now, there is no blockchain provider or a decentralized infrastructure provider that can take this entire load. And even if they do, there will be a delay in transmission. But I know that's the situation right now, and it's going to take time before that evolves. But at least now I see movement. If you were to ask me 2, 3 years ago when we started, there was no movement, there was no focus. No one was even focused on real products and real infrastructure.
Yeah, because we need to build like real economy for sustainable capital flow into an industry, right? So
Exactly.
just to be realistic, like from your insider view, it's capital being mobilized significantly into the infrastructure.
Yes, there is significant capital being improvised into infrastructure, into larger business to consumer expansion, into creating real adoption, not just fake adoption, but real adoption. There's some really great players in the past 2 to 3 years that have been added to the industry, with the right capital support, the right of strategic backing, who are working on really, changing the Web3 industry and bringing it closer to consumer projects like ours.
From a business expansion perspective, is the infrastructure like slowing you down in terms of
Not really.
expanding?
So again, we're not slowing down as far as our core business of being able to attract consumers, being able to acquire the right content, and being able to serve it to our consumers within a, as I said, within a decentralized economic layer, because that's easy, right? Economic layer is on us; we can do it. So we're not stopping. And obviously, right now, majority of our infrastructure is centralized. I have no shame in accepting that. But we don't want to compromise our growth for something that's not ready today. So we want to keep growing. And tomorrow, hopefully, once we're able to really fully migrate into a decentralized environment in terms of a delivery standpoint, things are only going to be easier for us, right?
Yeah, as business people, we need to de-risk like things, right?
Exactly. And the only question that we always keep asking ourselves, which is why we've been successful. So when we started in 2021, at that time, obviously I was alone. A lot of the founding team and the co-founders joined almost a year after that. And in the first year, to be honest, we made a lot of mistakes, because even my focus in the first year, because of what was happening in this industry, the Web3 industry as a whole, was a lot on that B2G segment, right?
So you were a geek, or you still a geek?
Yeah. So and we burnt a lot of precious capital in trying to acquire that segment, right? And do things that were targeting only that segment, which did not have a revenue flow back into the ecosystem, right? Which means that the revenue was not being really booked, and there was a lot of cash burn that was happening unnecessarily. But we realized that soon. And then, the thing that we agreed on and how we rebuild this business is one fundamental learning, which is always focus on the product and the service which people would consume, even if they didn't know that there is something called Web3. So create an experience and a product and a service that someone who does not even know what Web3 is will still consume. And that business will still be sustainable, that business will still be profitable, and that business will still be one of the biggest disruptions that you can do, right? And that's why we've been able to build this ecosystem. So our watch and earn model, it's been one of the biggest reasons for our growth, as you understand. It's an easy hook for the consumer. Oh, I can make money by watching people come in bulk. And we've not even restricted that to Web3. So majority of our disbursements right now that happen on the platform as rewards to consumers, they're actually happening in fiat. People are taking money in their actual bank accounts, using traditional mobile wallets, not digital mobile wallets or cryptocurrency wallets, right? So we're keeping it so flexible and open that our disruption is the decentralized mindset. The cryptocurrency is not our disruption, So which means that take the crypto layer out of it, the platform will still work. It will still be profitable. It will still be scalable, right? And I think that's been the reason of our success.
Yeah, it's the introductions of every new technology. It happens like over time, and you always need to give like consumer like the ways in, right? It's almost like the case when people used to list their home for sales on the newspaper, and then the migration to the listing sites. It takes like 2 decades. It's not,
of course,
not fast.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
But to turn profitability in 2 years in Web3 situations, it's impressive.
Yeah, we just turned profitable. So we just closed our fiscal year. at the end of June. So this fiscal year was our first profitable year, and because we had like tremendous revenue growth in the past 12 months. And to be honest, we've gone from almost $2.3 million dollars in revenue from the previous fiscal year compared to almost $7.5 million this year in revenue. And the purely, if you are to ask me what the reason is our massive expansion into sports. All of these sports rights that we've entered, and we've been able to do it right. We've been able to upsell our advertising impressions. We've been able to go to advertisers and create partnerships where they see the value of Myco. Because we've been able to go to advertisers and tell them that, hey, listen, right now you are advertising to Skye, let's say, and you're paying a $1 CPM for Skye and people like Skye who are not interested in your ad messaging because they are fed up. They don't have any vested interest within the platform. They don't have any vested interest within the content. They're not captive. They're not engaged. As soon as your ad comes, they're just going to skip. They're only interested in watching the content. They don't have a larger economic interest, or they're not empowered enough to be really a part of the platform. So I'm going to offer you the same audience, which is I'll offer you Skye, but I'll make sure that she is now engaged, because she has more to do with the platform and the content that she consumes. So will you be able to pay me a premium for the same audience? Will you pay me a higher CPM? 99% of the advertisers say yes to that, right? And that's where we are able to grow our advertising revenue so fast.
So how did you come across the idea of sports?
So my background, the first decade of my life, interestingly, I was associated with broadcast. I think we had this discussion offline as well. So yeah, I mean, like I've worked for television channels, both on the entertainment and sports side. I've been associated in my life with actually the national broadcaster in Pakistan, which is the National Sports TV channel. And I was in a very senior capacity there. I worked for them for a pretty decent period. And I always had this passion towards sports broadcasting and sports media. So yeah, that's where I think the idea came from, especially because, as I said, in the first 1 year, we experimented a lot with trying to create and produce and deliver and distribute a lot of content for a Web3 native audience, which I call the gamblers and the geeks. So we did a lot of content for them, and we realized that it wasn't successful, and we needed obviously a pivot. It wasn't commercially successful. It was successful in the sense that we built a big community. People came and onboarded the platform. Commercially, it wasn't viable and sustainable, right? So we needed a pivot. And because I already had this experience of being able to do so much within sports, I realized that as a streaming platform, that's the scalable pivot that we're going to take. And this is going to bring so many people into our ecosystem and our platform because it's going to drive millions and billions of users in.
Yeah, sports are all the advertising dollars are, right?
Yeah.
And it's interestingly enough because I spent a decade to study very fast growing startups, technology startups, and most of the time the founders are actually not the typical 20, like on the newspaper, 23-year-old like university drop-off. They're actually around the late 30s or 40 who they've been like so in and out of the industry, and they know what is the most profitable use cases, but what are the inefficiencies that can be solved by technology. And when you merge that two, you kind of get the sport situations.
The right formula. Yeah, I truly believe that. See, there is no better, as they say, if you want to learn swimming, there is no better way to just jump in the pool and try to swim. If someone tries to teach you on a diagram or on a PPT how you're going to swim, it's never going to work, right? So similarly, running a P&L, is something that you only learn on the job. And the thing with us is obviously me, and then later on the team members that joined, now obviously we have 5 co-founders in the business. Again, something very different with Myco is usually, no one likes to share the founder title. So in my case, we had the addition of 5 co-founders in our second year, towards the end of our second year, and most of them initially joined us as employees, but then we promoted them and gave them, co-founder status because they just contributed so much. And so all of them, now including them and me, we're almost 6 people in the leadership team. So all of us have built successful businesses for others in the past. We've been able to run successful business units. We've been able to run successful P&Ls. and we understand how P&Ls work.
And P&L is something that you need to internalize.
Exactly.
Like you need to really like run the P&L in real life to actually embody it.
100%, 100%. And again, it's about being accountable to every dollar that is spent, at the same time being ambitious. So there's a balance, if you're too accountable, then as a startup you won't grow enough, right? Because now you're overthinking every dollar that is spent. So you need to be cautious, at the same time you need to be ambitious, right? And within your business, there's going to be, obviously, especially with a large platform like ours, there's so many different areas within our business that you need to make sure that the leadership team, and this is one of my key learnings, is that collectively they cover all the areas. So which means that all the areas become your strength, because no human being, so if let's say I'm a great marketer, which, because most of my life I've done marketing, right? I can't be great at, let's say, finance. I can't be great at coding. I can't be, an engineer, the best engineer myself. So I need to find the right team members to fill in for all of these gaps, and then empower them, give them enough, make them, they need to have enough for them to feel like they're also co-owners in the organization just as much as I do, right? So yeah, it's a combination, I think, of experience, past experience, and at the same time having the right merger of skill sets between the different people who are running the organization.
Yeah, so that you can cover the downside, but also capture the moonshots. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So Moonshot is all about being ambitious at the same time, which also is the balance that you bring. So when you have a larger team, a larger leadership team, or you have multiple co-founders now in the business, everyone has a different personality, right? So let's say I'm very optimistic. Let's say I'm going for that moonshot. I want this to be at 500 million users in the next 4 years. There needs to be one guy in the team who says, there are some risks associated with that strategy, so that we can have a balanced approach. We have that check and balance.
Yeah, I totally understand. So Michael recently expanded into Pakistan. So how did that go?
Yeah, so Pakistan is actually a very interesting one for us because, I'm originally from Pakistan. So we went to Pakistan in January 2023. Initially, the idea was to just create a back office because, as you build a startup, you learn, you make some mistakes, as I told you. I told you the mistake about targeting too much of the geeks and gamblers and producing a lot of content and distributing a lot of content around them, which wasn't giving us enough returns. The other mistake that we also did was at some point in time, we didn't keep our human capital cost at check, right? Because, a huge platform like Mycoio, there's a huge dev team that needs, there's a lot of tech operations that you need. There's a lot of, support staff that you need, even from a customer service perspective. So at that point in time, we were doing all of it, majority of it in Dubai, some of it in UK, because one of the co-founders is UK based. And whether it was in-house resources or partners, they were all based in these two very expensive locations, Dubai and London. You understand how expensive human capital is there, right? And the team was growing, which means that we were burning a lot of cash. So the human capital cost when it comes to the operations staff, both tech and non-tech, was very high. And when we decided to, just about the same time when we started to aggressively focus on sports for the revenue, we also wanted to cut on the expense line, right? Because in order to have a strong bottom line, you need to do two things. One is to grow the revenue. Second is to also manage your expenses. And we saw that creating back offices is a very smart way of cutting your costs, right? So, and Pakistan has got great tech resources. It's the number 2 technology resource provider after India right now in the world. So, and our immediate requirement was obviously the tech resources. So we started it initially as a back office. It started as a tech back office. Then it became a content back office because a lot of the content work, editing stuff was happening there. And then, within like 4 to 5 months, there were some opportunities to acquire some rights for the Pakistan market, which we did. And we realized that the watch and earn model was working really well in a mass market like Pakistan with 250 million people. So it very quickly it evolved from just a back office to actually, one of our big growth markets as well. But what that also does is that now it's given us a very clear direction, which means that how are we going to expand into other emerging markets? We now differentiate our business between primary markets and emerging markets. Emerging markets are markets with huge populations, larger populations, lower per capita income, but at the same time, lower cost of user acquisition, and advertisement driven markets, because there's a lot of ad revenue in those markets because there's so much mass to target, right? So similarly now, as I told you, now the next market that we've identified, which we're expanding very aggressively in, is Egypt. We've already put our foothold. We're starting an office very soon. So that Pakistan experiment, which started as a back office, has actually, in a way, it's given us a lot of value addition in terms of our growth strategy going forward, and how we're going to now globally expand into different continents and different countries, how we are going to identify the right markets for us, and then build scale with them.
So finally, what advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs wanting to enter the Web3 industry and succeed?
I think for Web3 industry specifically, if I were to give an advice, especially for Web3 founders, I would just say that bring the consumer into what you're trying to build. Don't build a product, because a lot of the Web3 founders, even today, unfortunately, they are getting into Web3 startups rather than traditional startups, because they see Web3 as a tool to early liquidity. Is the earliest liquidity. And again, not many people are going to tell you this, but when you're a Web3 founder or a Web3 investor, a lot of the Web3 investors that invest into Web3 and not into traditional technology businesses is because they see the tokens being an early exit, early liquidity. Similarly, a lot of the founders that are building in Web3, they feel they're going to get early liquidity. That's why they're building in Web3.
Get rich quick
Get
scheme
rich
for
quick,
everyone,
yes, yes. So, and that's the no-go for me. For me, my advice is don't think about liquidity, stop thinking about the liquidity, start thinking about the consumer. The moment you start thinking about the consumer, you will build a product that Web3 needs, because now you will automatically have a long-term approach to what you're trying to do. Your liquidity requirement that you have in your head will go backseat, and the consumer will become your priority. Once the consumer becomes your priority, you will do really well, because this is exactly what's lagging in this industry. You'll immediately come in with a differentiator, because you'll have a differentiated strategy, because now you're targeting the real consumer. You build a product which will invite so many new users, thousands and hundreds of thousands of users into the industry, and you will be different to everyone else out there.
Yes, because traditionally, to build like a huge marketplace and to get to a unicorn status, normally it takes 7 years. But because of the advantage of these Web3, you can actually cut back the time.
Yeah.
You build it right. You can cut back the time
Yeah.
from 5 years or
exactly.
around there.
And see, if you look at Mycoio, to be honest, now sitting at 12 million users, last month with the Cricket World Cup, we had around 6 million monthly active users. Now, imagine all of the blockchains that know that Mycoio is building a product that has 6 million monthly active users. And essentially, all of these users can be brought on chain very easily, right? So we become the hot chick on the block, as they say, we become the hot chick on the block now for all of these blockchains, all of these infrastructure providers, because now eventually they realize, oh, here's a real product which can give us the real win, because the real win is the real consumer. Everything else is just temporary. All the other lime and shine and everything that you see is all temporary. The real deal is having the real consumer. So as if you can have that mindset and you can build a product which real consumers are going to use within Web3, there's so much capital that will come towards you. There's so much, intent that will come towards you. There's so much support that will come towards you, because eventually people are realizing that it is the consumer that the industry needs.
I totally agree with you. And I just had this debate with a VC before, because they were asking me about like scaling revenue. And I always go back to, first you need to build a product for the consumers, but then all the environments around you, whether it's a country, a market, or Web3 or whatever the case, you need to look at the environment and see what you can capitalize on as a tailwind.
Exactly.
Not as like a get rich quick scheme. But if you have the tailwind, that carries the momentum, and then you have a commercial model, then there you go.
Yeah. So actually, CZ, I know right now he's in jail and hopefully he's going to come back really soon. And again, my personal opinion is that even as an industry leader, maybe he could have also done more towards making this a B2C industry. But one thing I really like that he said was once, I think he said that, someone asked him for advice and he said, build products that people use, right? So it's very easy, it's just 4 lines. Build products that people use, right? And you will be successful.
Thank you, Umair. It was a wonderful conversations, and I wish you all the best for your next and current adventure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.